the context of TORAH, that there is a section in the Zohar. It's a very it's a known section actually, that says that God, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, created 7 worlds. We're the 7th world. He created a world, he destroyed a world. He created a world, he destroyed a world. And the Rav asked a simple question: what did the inhabitants of those 6 worlds do to deserve total extinction, annihilation, and so on, that forced the Kadosh Baruch Hu to create another world? And the Rav said, the Zohar does not tell us what they did. That we have no clue why those worlds were destroyed. So why bother telling us this piece of information? So the Rav said to teach us one step, and that was, what was the immediate reaction of God after he destroyed a world? He went and created a new world. And he says, that's the message. If we unfortunately go through a tragedy, whether it's on a personal level or a national level, what we ought to do is pick ourselves up and create a new world. And this is what the people in the communities, the settlements, the kibbutzim of Otef Asa, what their great resolve to rebuild. And by planting 3 weeks ago the wheat, they basically made a statement: we're coming back, we're going to rebuild. And my kids decided to give the kid, my new grandson, the name Neta, which is, I explained to them that some of the great Rabbanim of the past carried the name Natan Neta. It's a very, very rabbinic name. And Mirz Hashem, this little one will grow up to be a big Talmud Chacham as well, hopefully. You know that 2 weeks ago, some of you know that I was in flight, I was in transit, and I didn't give a share on a Sunday when I normally do. I actually found out about the birth of this grandson in the cockpit. So you know that I have a pilot son who's not flying now because he's up in the north guarding our country next to the Lebanese border, but he has friends in the business, and I was invited to sit in the cockpit, and there I found out from a WhatsApp that my daughter gave birth. So I walked out of the cockpit. I told the first flight attendant I saw, Nolat li nechet. I had a grandson born. She looks at me and she says, Harishon? First? I said, no, the 27th. She almost fainted. But Kadosh Baruch Hu has been excessively kind to our family, and he should continue to do so and share that chesed with all of Klal Yisrael. So this series is called a series of Chizuk. And because of that, I thought I would mention something about what will take place in 2 days' time when we complete the book of Bereshit. Just last night, I gave a shir in the Har Chorev Shul, and I addressed the issue of the saying of Chazak. Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek. And we say this at the end of the reading of Bereshit, Shmot Vayikra Bamidbar Dvarim. It's even a particular honor when the Gabbai selects somebody to have that last final aliyah, which usually it's Shvi of Parshat VAYECHI or Parshat PEKUDEI, whatever the end Parsha would be of the Chumash. And people stand up for the reading of the last pasuk, and they call out Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek. So it just so happens that even this minhag, and we'll see in a moment what the minhag is all about, this custom carries with it some variations, because if there wouldn't be variations, it wouldn't be Jewish. So there has to be, differences of opinion. So do you say Chazak, or do you say Chazak, Chazak, or do you say Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek, or do you say Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazak? Well, there is a pasuk in Shmuel Bet, Perek Yud, and there it says Chazak, V'nit Chazak, Ve'ad Ameinu, U'vad Arei Eloheinu. So what does that have to do with Sefer Torah and finishing a Chumash? Actually nothing. So the add-on of V'nit Chazak or V'nit Chazek is most probably something that carried after the original minhag kicked in, but the original minhag was to say Chazak. So what does that mean to say Chazak? And then the Baal Korei also says Chazak, and the person who gets the aliyah finishes with his bracha. So Rav Tukachinsky, in his calendar, his Eretz Yisrael calendar that many people have stuffed in their talis bag, that tells you anything significant on a particular day and what the Kriyat HaTorah of a particular day might be, and whatever it is. It's a very nice calendar especially for Gabayim. So there he says that the person who gets the aliyah of Chazak, which this Shabbat would be Shvi, does not say Chazak, Chazak. Just let the people in the shul say it, because he has to say the final bracha. And there would be an interruption, a hefsek, between the reading and the saying of the bracha. And hence, he strongly recommends that the person who received that final aliyah should not say Chazak, Chazak, v'nitchazek, but just stand there silently and listen to the crowd say Chazak and so on. Okay, so that's a minhag. Whether everybody attends to this, I'm sure that most people are not familiar with this line of Rav Tukachinsky. I'm not 100% sure that I would call it a hefsek, an interruption, because something that is of a minhag nature, very difficult to call it an interruption. I'll give you a good proof to it that also relates to this week's parsha, and that is the saying of Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto L'Olam Va'ed in the middle of Kriyat Shema. That's not really the middle; it's after the first pasuk. So we all know that Kriyat Shema in Parshat Vayetchanan says Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad V'Ahavta Hashem Elokecha. There's no Baruch Shem there. The Rambam in the first chapter of Hilchot Kriyat Shema, he tells us something highly unusual, that the Rambam would flush out a medrash to support a minhag. It's very rare in the Mishneh Torah that the Rambam is going to bring a midrashic source to support a minhag. And he says, the medrash says that Yaakov Avinu was troubled by the fact that his grandfather Avraham not only had Yitzchak, but he also had a Yishmael. And to use the modern word, who was off the derech. Yitzchak also had a son off the derech, and that was Esav. So Yaakov now has 12 sons, and he's concerned whether any of them are off the derech. So all 12 of them address their father, Shema Yisrael. Yaakov Avinu is Yisrael. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. We believe in one God. We're with you in everything that Abraham and Yitzchak taught you. We are there to continue the tradition of Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and everything that goes with it. So Yaakov Avinu, the grandfather, he says what every grandfather would do at the bar mitzvah of a grandson who, Baruch Hashem, is putting on tefillin and is reading the Torah and so on. Baruch Hashem. So Yaakov Avinu's Baruch Hashem was Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto L'Olam Va'ed. This is what the Medrash says. So Rambam says we continue echoing the Baruch Shem response of Yaakov Avinu, as if to say, when we say Shema in the morning and in the evening, we're also addressing Yaakov Avinu, Yisrael Saba, and we're saying Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Yeah, we, not only Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zebulun, the 12 tribes who were standing there, sitting there around Yaakov before he passed away, we are the descendants of that Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, and so on. And we're continuing to say Shema Yisrael, and Yaakov Avinu, as if to say, is echoing Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto L'Olam Va'ed, and so we say it low. Now, nobody in a million years would suggest that this Baruch Shem is a hefsek, is an interruption between Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad and V'Ahavta Hashem Elokecha. The minhag is an allowance for this so-called hefsek, and it's not really considered an interruption. And therefore, I don't believe that if the person getting the aliyah this week, this coming Shabbat, for Shvi in Parshat VAYECHI, and will say Chazak, Chazak together with the congregation, with the community, I don't believe that's a hefsek. But okay, Rav Tukachinsky is representing, that very Litvisha, very Litvak grouping where hefsek is a known commodity, and he makes that comment. But let's try to understand really what the Chazak is all about. So I'm going to do a share screen. I hope I can do this, and we're going to read a source. Probably it's not letting me do a share screen. No. Okay, I can't do the share screen. So, is Chana Spivak listening? If she is.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. And I.
Can I do a share screen, please? Okay, she's.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'd like to know if you can do a share screen.
Okay, I just have to figure out, because I'm on my phone, I have to figure out how to make you a co-host, and then you'll be able to share screen. I'll let you know, okay?
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to start this Baal Peh, but I hope I'll be able to bring up this source. In the 15th century, there was a great posek halacha His name was Rabbi Moshe ben Yitzchak Mintz. He's known as the Maharam Mi Mintz, Maharam Mintz. And he was born in northern Italy, but he's very Ashkenazi, and he served as a Rav in many of the Ashkenazi centers. He was a student of one of the great Ashkenazi poskim of the late 14th century, known as the Rabbi Yisrael Isserlein, who was the author of the Trumat Hadeshen. And this...
Rabbi Adler?
Yeah?
You are now good to share. As a matter of fact, I made you the host,
Okay.
and I'm going to sign out. So
No problem.
Okay? All right.
No problem.
Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Okay. Beseder Gamur. Beseder Gamur. So, if you have the screen in front of you, I am reading from source number 11. Shailot Teshuvot, Maharam Mintz, Siman Pehei. He writes as follows: V'chein anu nahekinu. We have a custom. De la'achar siyum hasefer. After we complete a book, one of the books of Chamisha Chumshei Torah of the Chumash, onim ha'kahal, the kahal responds b'kol ram, in loud voice, Chazak. Now he doesn't say anything about Chazak or Chazak benit Chazek. Apparently 500 years ago, the minhag still was just to say one word, Chazak. V'ta'ama shaloto minhag. And the reason for this custom, k'mo shekatav achar kol perek, as it's written, when we finish studying a chapter or a chapter of Gemara, actually, and in the Gemara it says Hadran, and certainly after the completion of an entire Masechet, Hadran alach. The phrase Hadran alach means we will return to you. The idea is that when we study anything, if we don't return to it, then ultimately we're going to forget it. We're going to forget it. And therefore, the reason for this custom of saying Chazak, Klomar, we finished the chapter of Gemara, or the entire tractate, we ask Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Torah says we should not forget. Is there somebody not muted? Is there somebody not muted? Because if that's the case, we're getting some... Shai Palak, could you please mute yourself? Shai Palak, could you please mute yourself because you're causing a lot of static?
Give me a moment.
Shai Palak, could you please put yourself on
Give
mute?
me a moment, kids. Can give me a moment.
That's it. Good. Thank you. So, good. So the pasuk Pen Tishkach et Advarim, the Torah tells us, please guard yourself that you don't forget. And I remember I had a Rebbe in Torah Semes Yeshiva in Borough Park many, many years ago. His name was Rabbi Geldworth, and he used to say, if you don't chaza, you forget. If you don't review, you're going to forget. And therefore, what we ask ourselves when we complete a section of Torah study, that we should review it. We should go back to it. Chazor bahen, please review it. Shalot tishkach, so you won't forget it. Or Kimoshe Nahagu Lomar Lechazan Yasher Kochacha. When a Chazan finishes davening, Shacharit or Musaf or whatever it is, people give him what they call a shkoyach. Yasher Kochacha means you should have great strength. What does that mean? Klomar, that is to say, Gamarta mitzvatra, you've finished, you've completed the mitzvah of being the shliach tzibur. Yiratzon shetisker lomar yeta mitzvot. You should have a merit of doing more mitzvot. So in other words, it's a shot in the arm. It's chizuk. You know, you might even be exhausted from being the shliach tzibur, from being the chazan. So we tell them Yasher Kochacha and so on. It's interesting. The Sfaradim don't have the phrase Yasher Kochacha. They have the phrase Chazak ve'ematz, which is very biblical, by the way. And with Yeshua, Perek Aleph, Chazak ve'ematz, and the Chazak ve'ematz is the equivalent of Yasher Kochacha, and that is to say, v'hochinami here too, Pirush Siyamta haChumash. We just finished the Chumash of Breshit. Yasher Kochacha. You should have strength to continue to review and to learn it again. Imkein hakahal korim v'kol ram shenisayem haChumash. The community calls out. Everybody in shul calls out Chazak at this point. This is the message of the Maram Mimintz. But our Rebbe Rav Soloveitchik had a different take. And in source number 12, this is not a quote, but it's a paraphrase of an entire shir. The Rav claimed that he was witness to old Chumashim, and in the end of each Chumash, Bereshit Shmot Vayikra Bamidbar Dvarim, the word Chazak was printed as it's printed in all of our Chumashim. Except in these old Chumashim, it was printed with an abbreviation. It was Chet Zayin with a Gershayim, a quote mark, Kuf, which meant that it's two words. It's Chet Zayin and Kuf. And what was the Chet Zayin and Kuf, the Rav said? It was Chazan and the Kahal. So this was Chazak. It was actually an abbreviation of Chazan v'Kahal, which meant that when the Balkorei came to the end of the Chumash, the last pasuk, not only did the Balkorei read, but the community also read the last pasuk. Now, does this sound familiar? Well, with regard to the 5 books of Torah, we don't do this. But if you recall the end of Megillat Esther, the end of Megillat Esther, the entire community says out loud, Ki Mordechai Hayudi Mishneh LeMelech Achashverosh. We do it at the end of Megillat Eicha, Hashivenu Lecha V'Shuva Chamesh Yemei Kikedem. It's also at the end of the Haftarah for Shabbat Rosh Chodesh, which happens to be the very end of the book of Yeshayahu. Vaya Midei Chodesh L'Chodsho Midei Shabbat V'Shabbato. It's reread. So some of these psukim at the end of the books are reread. And the question is, why are they reread, and how does that impact on the minhag of Chazak, where the Rav said it wasn't that the community called out Chazak as we do, in accordance with the explanation of the Maram Mintz, but the Rav said that what was called out was the entire last pasuk. Together, after the Bal Korei, who's in essence a Chazan here, after the Chazan Bal Korei reads the last pasuk, the community reread the last pasuk. And where does that come from? And the Rav said as follows. I'm now pointing to source number 8 on the page. Now, source number 8, the Mishnah tells us in Masechet Sukkah that whenever we say Hallel, we have a custom to repeat the ending psukim. All of us remember how we say Hallel. And when we get to Otcha ki anitani vati li Yeshua, we say it again. Otcha ki anitani li Yeshua. Even masu abonim hayta lerosh pina. Even masu abonim hayta lerosh pina. Me'et Hashem hayta zot niflat be'einenu. Me'et Hashem hayta zot until hodu Hashem ki tov kilam chazdo. Hodu Hashem ki tov kilam chazdo. So the Mishnah tells us that there were communities who had the custom to double lichtol. So there you have to double. Those communities who did not have it don't have it. But today, all of OUisrael has this custom where we repeat the last sentences, the last psukim of Hallel. The question is, what's behind this? Why do we do this? So the Rav explained as follows, that whenever we say praise to God, we're in deep trouble because there's no end to it. Do you remember what we say on Shabbat in Nishmat Kol Chai? Ilu finu malei shira kayam, ulshonenu rina kamon gala, v'siftotenu shevach kemerchavei rakia. If our lips, if our mouths, if our ability to speak would be unlimited, ein anachnu maspikim l'hodot. We'd never be able to complete the amount of praise that we would have to say about a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So whenever we say Hallel, it's almost a minuscule of a down payment. It doesn't even come mildly close to what we should be saying about a Kadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore, it's downright insulting to do that. It's almost like, and I would say lahavdil, if you would invite Albert Einstein to be a guest speaker, and you introduce him by saying that when he was in 4th grade, he did nicely on an arithmetic test. That would be totally insulting. So to say a minuscule of praise to God is insulting. So the question is, what would the exit strategy be to begin to say Hallel? And we have Hallel as a mitzvah. We have Shirot v'Tishbachot in Torah, Shirat Hayam. We have Psukei de Zimra every morning as part of before we get into the Shacharit. So how do you get out of it without insulting a Kadosh Baruch Hu? So the Rav gave an explanation, but before I'll say that, I'll just use an interesting illustration. Many of us remember that there were exit that scares me now. Many of us remember the newspaper Hatzofeh. Hatzofeh was a newspaper from the Pol Mizrahi. It's now defunct, and it morphed into Makor Rishon. But I remember many people used to look at the Hatzofeh newspaper, not because of the news, but because of the announcements. The news used to be pretty stale, like a day or two old. But the announcements, you want to know who got engaged, who got married, Lo Aleinu, who passed away. People would put these ads in the Hatzofeh, and that's why people would look at it. So there was somebody who wanted to honor some rabbi for some occasion, and he was concerned, how would he write out the name of this Rav? How would he prefix it? Would he say, L'chvod Harav? I mean, every Tom, Dick, and Harry is Harav, so that's not good. Harav HaGaon. So half of the Tom, Dick, and Harrys today are Harav HaGaon. No, that's not good enough. So we'll say Harav HaGaon HaTzadik. Nice. Maybe that's not good enough for him. Maybe it's Harav HaGaon HaTzadik HaChasid. I mean, you can go on with all these prefixes. So he decided to do something very clever, and he wrote, L'chvod Harav HaGaon v'chulei v'chulei v'chulei, etc., etc., etc. Which means that, listen, I know that you're more than Harav HaGaon. Exactly what you are, I don't have a clue, but you know who you are. So that's all inclusive in the etc., etc., etc. But I'm acknowledging that you're way beyond Harav HaGaon. As funny as this sounds, the Rav said that's the exit strategy. And therefore, what we do by Hallel is not just say, Hodul Hashem ki tov kulam chazdo. We're going to say it again. Hodul Hashem ki tov kulam chazdo. Now, really, we should say it 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times, 1,000,000 times, and 1,000,000,000 times. We don't have time. So by saying it a second time, we acknowledge the fact that Kadosh Baruch Hu is way beyond one time. Way beyond. So we symbolize it by saying it a second time. That's what we do by Hallel. And what do we do in Pesukei Zimra? So in Pesukei Zimra in the morning, we begin with Yishtabach. And we're very, very optimistic because we have a Tehillim, the Siddur quotes from Sefer Tehillim, and we say, Ubishirei David Avdecha, Nalelcha, Nishabechacha, Nefe'ercha. In Baruch Shama, we say, boy, we're going to do a job now. We have the Sefer Tehillim of David Amelech. And you get going. You start saying Ashrei and all the Halukas and so on. You get to the end. You look at your watch. You know you have to go to work. So you have to end somehow. So how do we end? We end with the bracha of Yishtabach. So there we declare, you, God, are the master of all the expressions of praise. Habocher b'shirei zimra. Pick for yourself whatever you think about yourself. I have to go to work. I have to stop. And that's how we somehow end it. And in the same similar vein, Kaddish. So, Kaddish has nothing to do with death. Kaddish is a type of proclamation that God's name is going to be great and sanctified throughout the whole world. Now, that which Avraham Avinu started is going to come to a climactic ending at Yemot HaMashiach time. So we in a minyan, so this is an expression of Kiddush Hashem. We say Yitkadel V'Kadesh, we say God's name will be great and sanctified, which is based on a pasuk in Yecheskel, V'Tkadilti V'Tkadishti, Shmei Rabbah, his great name. Where? In the world that he himself created. When? Now. We don't want to wait another 1,000 years. And I'll say parenthetically that in the 12th century, in Yemen, they added to Kaddish, V'chayechon of Yom Echon, U'v'chayei de Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, in the name that the Rambam should live to see it. That was the unbelievable attitude that they had towards the Rambam, which was just unimaginable. They said the Rambam should live to see the Yemot HaMashiach. V'chayechon of Yom Echon, V'chayei de Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, Ba'agala Uzman Kariv. In Hebrew, we say ototot. Right now, b'mheira b'yameinu. And then we all say in Aramaic, which is the Hebrew equivalent to Yehi Shem Hashem Mevorach Me'atav Ad Olam. God's name is going to be great, the whole world. In the Aramaic, it's Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevorach Le'olam U'Mea Maya. And then we have an additional 8 expressions of praise. After we already said Yitkadel V'Yitkadesh, we have another 8. Yitparech, Yishtabach, Yitpaer, Yiturmem, Masei, Yitadar, Yitalev, Yitalal. Shmo Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In Aramaic, Shmei D'Kudsha Baruch Hu. Fine, that's it. We said 10 expressions of praise to God. You done? Not at all. He's le'ela min kol brichata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma. He's way above all of the expressions of praise that was ever said in this world. So that is the etc., etc., etc. V'chulei, v'chulei, v'chulei. And therefore, and I'll just use one more example from the world of halakha, and I'm going to show it again on the screen. In the source number 9, which is going to go over to the next page, it reads, there is a question in the Beit HaMikdash when the Leviim would sing the song of the day, right? Today, Hayom Yom Chamishi B'Shabbat, Shebo Hayu HaLeviim Omrim BeBeit HaMikdash. And we have a chapter of Tehillim, that's all. Every day we say a different chapter of Tehillim. The easy one to understand is Shabbat, Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbat, but on Sunday, LeDavid Mizmor Shema Ha'aretzim Lo'am, Tebel B'Yoshveba. There's a Gemara Masechet Rosh Hashanah, I believe it's Daf Lamed Gimel, that tells us that there's a connection between the chapter that was selected with that particular day of creation. To say that would be a full-blown shiur itself to explain. Well, whatever it is, the Levium had a text, and the Levium there was instrumentation. So you had a choir with a band, an orchestra behind the choir. So the question is, what does the orchestra do? It plays out the melody, and the people sing the text. So when we consider the Shirah of the Leviim, which was the most important part of the Shirat HaLeviim? Was it the text? Was it the message of the chapter of Tehillim? Or was it the nigun, the melody that comes out of the instruments that were there in the Beit HaMikdash? So it seems that the text seems to be very important. And that's what the Gemara says in Masechet Sukkah, Ikar Shirah B'Peh, that which came out of the mouths of the Leviim, which means the text. That was most significant. But there's another opinion, and the other opinion says just the opposite. Ikar Shirah B'Kli, that what was important about the Shirat HaLeviim was the nigun, the melody, not so much the text. The text was important to support the melody, but what really was important was the nigun. And Rav Soloveitchik tried to give some understanding to this because it doesn't even make sense. I mean, they're singing a chapter of Tehillim. That should be important. Why would the nigun, the melody, be so, not just so important, but even more important than the text of Tehillim, Ikar Shirah B'Kli? And the Rav said because the Shirah B'Peh, the text, is the limited amount of shevach, praise that human beings were able to offer. The nigun is the etc., etc., etc. It takes the idea of the Shirat HaLeviim to a higher level of beyond words. It's beyond words, and that's the superior aspect of the melody that came forth from the instrumentation at Beit HaMikdash. Now we know that Torah is both learning and it's also song. The whole mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah is given in the mitzvah of V'ata kitvu lechem et hashira azot ve'lamda et bnei Yisrael sima b'fihem. Right, here you have it on the source number 1. V'ata kitvu lechem et hashira azot ve'lamda et bnei Yisrael sima b'fihem. The Torah calls itself Shira. Why? Because on the one hand, Torah is a text for study, no doubt. But Torah is also an instrument of praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that He actually gave us the Torah. And therefore, said the Rav, a person getting an aliyah to the Torah makes 2 brachot. The first one is for study. Asher b'chavana mikol ha'amim. It's the same bracha that we use every morning for Birkat Torah before we study Torah. But the final bracha at the end of the aliyah is the praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that He actually gave us the Torah. Shenatan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Because we acknowledge the fact that the Torah is also Shirah. Furthermore, there is an understanding by some of the greats that when one reads Tanakh, even if the person does not understand one word of what he or she is saying, there's a fulfillment of reading Torah. On what level? On the level of song. On the level of song. We know people who read Tehillim. They don't understand a word they're saying. Yet there is value to just reading the Tehillim. So this is the concept of Shirah, as opposed to Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral texts of, let's say, Mishnah, Gemara, Midrash, Shulchan Aruch, Halacha, Zohar, Kabbalah. anything in the world of Torah Shebaal Peh, if you don't have a basic understanding of what you're reading, the reading is a total waste of time. So you have to really, you don't have to understand it in depth to get the mitzvah. You can read a Mishnah and know that you're reading a Mishnah about some mitzvah. That's okay. But if you're just reading Bameh Madlikin in the Siddur, and you don't have a clue that this section is the second section of Masechet Shabbat, all about candle lighting Friday night, it's just a total waste of time to read it as a parrot would read it. I mean, I can tell you that I'm capable of singing an aria from some Italian opera. I don't understand one word of Italian, yet I'm able to imitate like a parrot some of the great opera singers who sang a particular piece. So I can tell you with great embarrassment that I remember in America there was some chazanim who davened for Rosh Hashanah Kippur. They also didn't understand one word they were saying, and yet they were chazanim. And it's not a good thing, by the way, if you have that. But unfortunately, there were some chazanim who didn't understand what they were saying. When it comes to reading Tanakh, you can read it without any comprehension whatsoever and still have an understanding, a value on the level of Shira. And because that's the case, every Kriyat Torah not only carries the concept of learning, but also carries the concept of Shira. And that's why, as I mentioned, the person getting the Aliyah concludes the Aliyah with praise of the giving of the Torah. So on the level of Torah reading, in the framework of Shira, we, says the Rav, end each Chumash just like we end Hallel with repeating the last pasuk as an etc., etc., etc. So the Chazak, the Chazan v'Kahal idea was that the Baal Koreh, as a Chazan, reads the last pasuk as he just completed the book of Breshit, and the Kahal, the community, the congregation, rereads the last pasuk as a type of symbolic, etc., etc., etc. And that's a very interesting take to what the concept of what the minhag of Chazak was all about. Yes, we need chizuk. There's no question we need chizuk, because a war drains us on so many different levels. It somehow depresses us. And if somebody's walking around depressed, the person is not sick. The person is very normal. Maybe the people who aren't depressed might be a little bit abnormal. Unfortunately, this war is dragging out a little bit longer than anybody even thought originally, and it's taking its toll on the people. But we're just going to have to rededicate our resolve, and I think that's what's happening. We need the chizuk. We need the chizuk for ourselves. We need the chizuk for others. We have to hang in there and give strength to our chayalim. And I know many of you are involved in all kinds of projects to help our chayalim, no doubt. Tefillah, to augment the tefillah as much as possible, wherever we can, whether it's a Beit Knesset, whether it's at home. You have a few minutes, you pick up a Tehillim, you say a few prakim. It's the cumulative effect of all this tefillah of Am Yisrael. Kadosh Baruch Hu, how could he ignore this? He has to take this into consideration and take it into account. We ask that the Kadosh Baruch Hu should give us the relief that we're all really looking forward to, should give us a victory that will allow all the people in the south and the north to go back to their homes and begin the process of rebuilding their lives. And in Yis Hashem, it's going to be a great era, hopefully, of peace and tranquility, and it will be Shalom Yisrael. I mean, when Yaakov Avinu passes away, with all his troubles that he had during the lifetime, he was able to bring his neshama back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, knowing that he did the final job that was required of him to give over that tradition to the next generation. We're going to do that so that the next generation will be able to live here in Eretz Yisrael in peace, we'll be able to live in prosperity, we'll be able to live in Gashmiut and Ruchaniyut. This I heard from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who talked about Mashav Ruach, U'Mordet HaGeshem. The Ruach is the Ruchaniyut, the spirituality, and the Geshem is the Gashmiut, the material. You have to have both. We have to synchronize the two. You have to have the proper balance. And God willing, we will be blessed with the Mashiach Ruach Mordei Geshem. We will have both the Ruchaniyut and the Gashmiut, and it will be L'Tovat Am Yisrael. So Kol Tov, and we should all hear from each other, B'Sorot Tovot.